Thank you for joining this brand new episode of Speaking of Happy with your host, Eli Rigatuso. With me tonight is Reverend Juniper Meadows, who recently moved to the area to lead the congregation at Second Unitarian Church of Omaha. Meadows is a musician, poet, and former drag performer with a lifelong love for the Appalachian arts of music and storytelling. Thanks for joining us for this brand new episode of Speaking of Happy, starting right now. Starting right now. I always kind of crack myself up with that because I don't know what that little crack is at the very end there, but hey, here we are, another episode of Speaking of Happy, and I'm really excited for our guest this evening. She is brand spanking new transplant to Omaha, Nebraska, and it's the Reverend Juniper Meadows. She's from East Tennessee Valley. She has moved here to take on being the minister at Second Unitarian Church of Omaha. And Meadows has spent the better part of her adult life as a leader and advocate and service of the transgender communities to which she belongs. Her ministry is rooted in seeking the poetry within the more than human world, as it is revealed by science and folk wisdom, calling attention to the narrative nature of human relationships, comforting the afflicted, and afflicting the comforted, or the comfortable. Sorry. Comfort, that's a little bit of a tongue twister. Comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. I like that. Let's afflict the comfortable.
Amen. That's right.
Amen. Welcome. It's so lovely to have you. Thank you so much for saying yes and like not even knowing what to expect and being willing to join in the conversation this evening. I really appreciate it.
Well, shucks, Eli, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Absolutely. I saw your post in one of the I think it was the Trans Nebraska group, saying that you were new to town and that you were looking for exciting things to do and people to meet. And so I thought, well, what a great way to welcome you to Omaha than to get you on the show.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. This is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much again. And there's a couple of reasons why I wanted to have you on. One is because Second Unitarian Church is the home of a really awesome little group that meets. It's a social group and it's an all ages group, which is something that I think is really awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about what you know about OATS, which is the Open Arms Transgender Social Group, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
I think
grass here, y'all. But,
I always have to second guess myself with that. But yeah. So tell us a little bit about that first of all.
Sure. So OATS is a ministry of Second Unitarian that started a while ago. Like I came out in 2012, and as I understand it, OATS is at least that old. And that was a different time. To be sure, it was a hard time to start doing trans advocacy and trans support in any kind of public way. So I believe this speaks to the courage of Second Unitarian as a congregation to host that. And it was deeply impactful to people's lives. It began, as I understand it, as a program for young people. It sort of transformed over time to being more inclusive of all ages. And now the vision is that it is broadly inclusive across age groups, which is something that as I understand it, Omaha doesn't have, and a lot of places don't actually have. My virtual background's doing crazy stuff, y'all. And that's so vital. It's so vital for young families with trans kids to be able to come and see elders in our community and to be reminded that we can survive and we can thrive. We can have full lives. And be authentic and be real. And I think it's a vital way to use this ability to grant people the reassurance that that transness does not have to limit our lives in any particular way. It can actually open up a lot of room to be real. So I'm so excited for this to be coming back.
Yes, absolutely. I am as well. I have been going to the group quite a bit. It kind of fell off during the pandemic, didn't really do any of the virtual stuff,
Yeah.
predominantly because I do a lot of stuff virtually, especially through the pandemic, and it was just like,
Yeah.
I think I did go to one of the virtual sessions and then didn't really go after that, not because of anything the group was doing. And it is really, it's an amazing space. I love that, not only is it a great space for the youth to see us elders and learn from us, but it's also a really great space for us to learn from them
I
and
okay.
and provide that support, both ways, right? I think that there's a lot of things for us as elders to learn from the young people as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell me? So you meet once a month?
Mhm. Our first meeting is going to be on May 21st from 12 p.m. to 2 at Second Unitarian. I can't remember the address off the top of my head right now, but I can get that to y'all if you need it. Um, it's I think we're just going to be kind of finding our feet again, finding our stability, getting to know each other. It is a social group, so it's not like any kind of highfalutin stuff. We're just gathering together, as a people and sharing a community. I anticipate a reasonable turnout of people. The more the merrier.
Is there still going to be like a potluck? People should bring some food, or how's that going to go?
Um, I, I will talk to Carla Bill, who is my sort of co-leader in this ministry, just to sort of see where we're at there. But I think that would be wise. So bring a snack, at least. Um, but I think, yeah, sharing in food is vital. And in the trans support groups I helped to facilitate back in Knoxville, we also saw a dip off when we went to online spaces, and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we can see trans people online, to be reminded, that other people like us exist, but to have that there's a certain dimension of intimacy that's lost, when we don't have those in-person spaces. So it makes sense that there's no shade. It makes sense that there's a dip off, broadly, but I am looking forward to, bringing it back. My hand disappeared there for a second. Bringing it back to life, if you will. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, bring some food, bring your friends, come
Yeah,
on
because it is
down,
it
y'all.
is open to all trans folks, transgender, non-binary, gender fluid, gender diverse, of all ages,
That's right.
and also folks who are family and friends.
That's right. Yeah, that is
Yeah, and you are right. It is the only group, I believe, in Omaha that actually, besides PFLAG,
mhm,
PFLAG Omaha does have all ages, but it's not centered on only a trans experience. This is more centered on the trans experience. So I know I started going to the group, I believe, in 2016, 2017. I think it was 2016. I started my transition in 2015. I'm not trying to get anywhere though. I mean, in transition, we could have a whole conversation about that.
yeah,
But yeah, so it is a really awesome group that is open to anyone who wants to be supportive of and be in community with folks like us.
that's
So
right.
very cool, very cool. Um, all right, so I'm gonna get right into it. I've been thinking all day, past couple of days actually, since I asked you if you would join me on the show. I was like, what are some of the questions that I would really want to ask? And one of the things that I know that comes up a lot for the LGBTQ plus community, especially as it relates to religion and church, is just the harm that has been done. And how do you reconcile that with being a member of the church? Is there something about the Second Unitarian Church and their philosophy or their belief that is healing in regard to that? Can you speak about that?
I believe so. So I was raised Presbyterian, PCUSA. Fortunately, I reckon, out in Rockwood, Tennessee, which is a relatively small town. I got my fair share of religious trauma. I reckon that's fairly common in our community. I think I fared better than a lot of us, but the wounds that are left by religious trauma are deep. They're deep because they talk about, we are told we're told a story. I don't use the word story lightly. Also, I think stories are fundamental to who we are as human creatures. But we're
Yeah.
told a story about what is ultimate, what truly deeply matters, and then we are then when we authenticate our lives, when we come out, when we embrace who we are, we shine our light. We're told that we're not a part of that picture. That's messed up. That messes us up. That messes up our narrative. It messes up our story. And of course, we will, if we are, it is all good and right for us to choose our own hearts over religion, certainly. Um, Unitarian Universalism is quite a bit different from your sort of your other brands of the Protestant tradition. We do come from a Protestant tradition. We are consolidated in 1961 for the Unitarians and the Universalists, since Unitarian Universalist. But we don't do creeds and we don't do dogmas. So you're never going to hear me from a pulpit telling you what to believe. That's not my job, and it's just not what I do. We are united by principles rather than creeds and dogmas. So we have 7 principles, going on 8 actually, because we're a living tradition. Our principles are dynamic and can change over time. They have and they will continue to. Principles such as the inherent worth and dignity of every person. You matter, I matter. We all just matter because we just do. That's non-negotiable for us. We believe that we ought to be, treating people with kindness and compassion in human relations. That democracy, while not perfect all the time, is essentially the best mode of governance, and we promote that within our congregations, which function as democratically. We don't have bishops and popes. Congregations. I'm hired by the congregation. I was not sent here. They chose me. Sorry, my cat is invading my space. Get back here. Banjo, skip.
Okay. Cats are always welcome on the show.
But there is something of a theological bend in our principles as well. We believe that we promote our interconnectedness to all life, to the planet, and different people will articulate those principles in different ways. I think that there is theological meat there, if you will. And furthermore, we have sources, things like the direct experience of transcendent mystery and wonder being our first source. So that direct experience we have, we're rooted sort of in the tradition of the American transcendentalists. So, talking Emerson and Thoreau and complicated figures of their own time, but their emphasis on the right of the individual to articulate the truth of their own heart is still very essential to who we are. They might have got a little hyper individualist for us today, but we're a living tradition. We grow and we're dynamic. As for my relationship to Unitarian Universalism, when I came out, I was sort of slightly post-Christian, but I had been sort of lightly attending Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church out in Knoxville, Tennessee. And, like a lot of trans people who came out in like 2010s, 2012 is when I came out, your whole life sort of falls out beneath your feet. And this congregation, helped me survive. I don't know if I'd be here with you tonight if it weren't for this denomination having my back and reminding me that I'm a human being and that I matter.
Wow.
And that's
Yeah. So is that originally what drew you to this particular church, or not Second Unitarian here in Omaha, but to the philosophy of the Unitarian Universalists?
I was looking for a place to seek freely, to explore. I had a lot of questions. I didn't really receive a lot of answers at the Unitarian Universalist Church, but that's kind of the point. I think, and that frustrated me for a while because I just wanted to know something to believe in, to hang my hat on, if you will. But that's not as important. You're not going to find someone who will tell you what is true, because asking me the truth is that truth is mysterious. I am far more in love with mystery than I am with sort of certitude. When you know something, especially something so fundamental about why we're here, what we're for, you're picking the flower and you're taking it and you're saying it's mine and it can't grow anymore. It can't do anything. It's dead. It's pretty, but it's gone. when we can abide with the mystery and we can appreciate it, which is something I hope to cultivate with my ministry, then we can, we can enable a kind of deep pluralism, where that's sort of the hallmark of Unitarian Universalism, where you'll go and you'll meet Christians and atheists and Buddhists and pagans and all kinds of folks with different perspectives. And those perspectives are all welcome under those shared principles and our shared covenant, and we have our shared sources. But yeah, so there's a lot of diversity in thought and diversity in kinds of people: trans people, cis people, straight, gay. I would say multiracial. The better part of our congregations are predominantly white. That's a whole nother story. But because we've not been perfect on everything, we've not historically, but we are working and we're moving, and that is what makes us a living tradition. We call ourselves the living tradition for a reason, because we're alive, we're dynamic, and we can grow. And growing can hurt.
Yeah.
We're all in our, it can be hard sometimes, but we are moving. We're moving towards something beautiful, I think.
Sure. That's the what was that in your in the bio you sent me? The part about the uncomfortable. Yes,
Yeah.
afflicting the comfortable, comforting the afflicted and afflicting
Afflicting the
the
comfortable.
comfortable. Because I think that it's interesting because I caught myself watching a series this past weekend about the cult run by what was his name? Heaven's Gate, the ones that all right?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because there was an interview that was done with a I believe it was a therapist. Let me see if I can pull up the quote that I wrote down, because it just really struck me, and I think that it's so important. So here's what this person said, clinical psychologist. What people need to understand is that everybody is vulnerable, that at a certain point in your life, when you're a little low or you're in a time of transition, the right leader can come along with the right message, catching you at the right moment, and you could be vulnerable.
That's right.
Because one of the things that they were talking about is people wanting to unpack and understand how those kinds of tragedies happen.
Mhm.
We all think about that, and all of the tragedies that happen in the world, like, how do these things happen? And it's almost like I look at it like this, for myself, I can see the parts of me that are light, I can see the parts of me that are dark. I can relate to, without judgment, folks who have caused great harm,
Mhm.
and know that they're harmed, right? That they've been harmed, and that there's not a way for them, there hasn't been up to this point, for them to find that peace and that place of understanding that they don't have to let the dark side speak louder.
Yeah.
You can embrace it without becoming it.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does. Because we as humans contain multiplicities. We contain a sort of paradox. I've heard it said that all great spiritual truths are paradoxes at the bottom of everything. And I think one of the saving things about Unitarian Universalism for me has been that we get to have those contradictions within us. It's because we're human beings. We're not trying to be not human. We're not trying to transcend human depravity or anything. We don't buy that. It's bad theology, in my opinion.
Right. Like the whole conversation around being broken.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, show me something that isn't broken. You know, show me
Well, and
something.
also it's like, we are flawed, but it's not that we need to be fixed in some way. See, that's what I've always had an issue with when it comes to religious dogma. I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic grade school. It was not a good experience for me. I am indigenous, and in my younger years, spending the entire summer out in the sun, and then showing up in my pressed and starched white shirt for school.
Yeah.
I stuck out because it was predominantly white kids, and I wasn't treated well.
Yeah.
And so, there's this part of me that can understand to my core what it feels like to be othered from a very young age.
Mhm.
But I also know that there was a side of me that was like, I don't have to become like the abuser in order to find some sense of self or peace, that it's not about me wanting to cause further harm. So I guess what I would say is, what would you say to the young people that are watching, or maybe even the folks who are a little bit older, who are looking for a place to call home? And I don't want to say even a church home, but just a place where they can be seen, valued, affirmed, and loved and appreciated for exactly who they are and exactly who they're not. Like, what would you tell them about coming to your church?
I think we all deserve a place where we can bring all that we are, all of our complexities and all of our messiness and all of the growing edges that we have and the wounds we carry. And someone could come to Second Unitarian and it might not be for them, and that would be okay. Um, and I think it's important. I am more interested in collaborating with other like leaders in the area and other non-religious institutions in the area to find, to be able to be like, well, this isn't for you. Then maybe there's another place that you could find a place to call home. Um, but that community is vital because we are fundamentally social creatures.
Yes.
Like before we're anything else, we're primates, and we need to be able to live into that social animal edge that we have. We need that. When we don't have it, it shows. And we need to be able to come in, like you said. We're often taught that we're broken and we're in need of fixing. I often reference a line from Leonard Cohen's anthem: "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in."
Mm.
That's I feel that in me. I have definitely felt broken and discarded. Um, I know that's a very all too common experience for people in our community, and also all kinds of people
Yeah.
feel discarded and broken and cast aside, and maybe asking themselves, where do I fit in into the bigger picture of things? Where can I bring all that I am? Um, and I think first and foremost, it's important to be able to find a place, to try places, to experiment, to be brave, and to risk being loved, to risk being loved, because being loved can feel kind of scary, because it entails a kind of vulnerability, and vulnerability isn't weakness. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's a source of strength. Actually, it is a
Yeah.
willingness to open one's heart and say, "This is who I am. This is who I am. Do you see me? Do you love me?" Um, Generally, I would hope that experience at Second Unitarian would be like, where one feels loved, where one feels seen, where one is able to be witnessed to as their whole, complex, and beautiful self, warts and all. Um, I've only been here for a short time, so I'm not really sure how the culture of Second Unitarian works entirely yet. But my impression is that what I would want to do with my ministry is to ensure that we can have as broad and accepting a place as possible for people, and also opportunities for people to engage that aren't just Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
It's because not everyone wants to get out of bed and go to church. I think the place of communities of faith is evolving to be beyond just Sunday mornings, and if we're not evolving in that direction, we're just asking to be irrelevant. Um, and I'm for keeping my ministry and the ministry of this congregation relevant for as long as I'm here. Back to your question, it is vital that we as social animals have a place that we can be nurtured, and that we can nurture, that we can witness to other people and be witness to ourselves, that we can love and be loved. Um, that's fundamental to what it means to be a human being. To interweave our stories with one another. Something I rattle on about a lot from my sermons is I love to quote Thomas King, who's a Native American storyteller and author, and he says in his book The Truth About Stories, the truth about stories is that's all that we are. We're fundamentally narrative in a profound sense. I struggle to think about things that aren't stories, to think of things in a non-narrative way. I think this underscores a narrative nature to at least the human experience. And where do we get to tell our stories? We need to.
Yeah.
Storytelling is a fundamental aspect of the human condition. We've been hanging around fires and telling stories for ever, surely.
Well, and the other piece of that is, so as an indigenous people, first of all, you got me with Thomas King because
Yes.
I read Green Grass Running Water. If you've never read it, it is
Check it out on our
truly an extraordinary piece. And as a matter of fact, every time I think about it, it makes me want to cry because it's just the story within the stories, right?
website.
Is so powerful in just us discovering ourselves. And so, there's pieces of that I carry with me because I look at, I the only thing that I have to map on in religious experience, of course, is that fundamental, like, origin of Catholicism.
Yes.
But as I grew older and moved away from the church because I kept asking my family, my dad wasn't really a believer, my mom was, which is ironic because my mother is indigenous. She's a product of the boarding school. She went to a boarding school. She was born on a reservation in Kashina, Wisconsin, and so as I started to get older and started to learn the truth, the stuff that we're not taught in school about who we were as Native American people and what happened to us, it was even harder to be a member of a church that could have caused and did cause so much pain and suffering.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. Unitarian churches, prior to the consolidation, not long ago enough, the Unitarian Church had founded a boarding school. And can I swear here?
Yes.
It's fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not on
it's
LinkedIn tonight, so we can drop
okay,
some
good.
F-bombs
To be
tonight.
real with you, when I learned about that, my blood started boiling, and I just could not believe what I was hearing. But
Wow.
it's true. It's true. And
See, but it's important that you know that. It's
yeah,
so important that you know that you acknowledge that that you don't wanna close the door on that and act like it didn't happen because that, to me, is where the true healing begins.
yeah. If you my favorite minister of all time is Fred Rogers, who was a Presbyterian minister, Mr. Rogers. And Mr. Rogers says that everything human is mentionable and everything mentionable is manageable. And sometimes mentioning things can hurt. Sometimes mentioning things can be deeply shameful. I mean, certainly this is not the only time the Unitarian Church has floundered. This isn't, and it's not to say we've never done anything great or good, but we also have the wounds we've caused too, and we have to acknowledge them and name them and move into accountability and to be in right relationship with the communities that we've harmed, which is
Yeah,
just this is the path to realness.
yeah,
This is how we find reconciliation through accountability. You can't just fix these things.
yeah,
Healing takes time, and if you don't address it, if you don't name it, well, you might as well just be ignoring. You get a cut on your finger. Oh well, no big deal. You don't take care of it, you don't tend to it. You might lose your dang finger.
yeah, yeah,
And if we would just find the courage to mention these things, we
yeah,
can enter into a path of healing. And and that entails listening. That entails listening and shutting our mouths and being in relationship with people, which is hard for me because I'm an extrovert. But that's something I'm wanting to grow into with my ministry is how do we be in right relationship with people who have been marginalized from our communities. And I mentioned earlier how I would say we're multiracial, but that isn't true for most of our congregations because we failed to put our money where our mouth was. We've messed up. We were at Selma with Dr. King. Some ministers died at Selma with during the March on Selma, like Reverend James Reed. But we also institutionally have problems that institutions have about making money move where it needs to go. And done good and we've done bad like any institution has. But I think fundamentally the message of Unitarian Universalism has for me been saving. And congregations are independent. So a given congregation isn't necessarily as culpable as the broader denomination is all the time. But even still, if we wear that name, if we carry that banner, if we call ourselves Unitarian Universalist, it's important to be, real and to reckon with the harm that has been caused in our name,
Yeah.
and to find a path forward um, with diverse communities who aren't necessarily under our auspices and bearing that name. So I think it's important to name the harm that was done with boarding schools, the harm that was done, in failing to fund the Black Affairs Caucus way back when. I mean, there's a lot of history. Like I said, it's a whole other story. But naming before we can heal, we have to name the wounds that were
Certainly.
caused.
Yeah. So tell me, is it uncommon for a minister of a Unitarian Universalist church to be trans?
Not really. We've The first trans person, my dog is barking. The first trans person ordained, I believe, was Reverend Barb Grieve, or was it Reverend Sean Dennison? There aren't many trans women ministers.
Mm.
There are quite a few trans masculine, non-binary, and trans men. Excuse me. Hey, Mia, the dog and my cat are having a moment. There aren't a lot of us, but there are some. I am presently on the steering committee for the Trans Religious Professionals group. For now, I'm stepping down soon so I can focus on my own ministry. But we're here. We've been here. We've not always been perfect. I think individual congregations have struggled, especially with non-binary pronouns sometimes. And I've had my own kind of struggles with congregational life too. Like, no shame to my cis friends and allies, but sometimes lack of understanding. We have to listen to one another. We have to listen to one another and try and practice compassion in human relations. It's one of our principles, y'all.
Yeah.
Which entails listening and learning from one another. Um, but there aren't a great many of us, but there are more and more of us. I know in seminary when I was leading, there was another trans woman and several non-binary people and a couple of trans masculine people. So it's increasingly common, which I think is a good thing
Yeah.
because our denomination needs voices of difference and needs voices on the margins to be centered so that we can do that kind of reconciliation healing I was mentioning. Um, but yeah, I don't know of any other trans clergy in Nebraska, which is
Well, I was gonna say, I don't think that there is. I'm pretty sure there is not a trans person, at least in Omaha or anyone in Lincoln that I know of.
mhm.
I do know that Second Unitarian has marched in pride for a number of years, here in Omaha. They've always had a presence at Pride, which I thought was, wonderful. Again, I haven't gotten myself back to the point where I've found a place where I would wanna go on and spend my Sunday. I'm a little more of uh I find my spirituality in other things. I'm not necessarily the person who needs to go do the stand up, sit down, fight, fight, fight. That's what I call it. And
Yeah,
that might still be like, leftover from Catholicism,
I'm
but
trying to move our liturgy around so that we're doing less like sitting, standing, where we're like, um, liturgical elements that get us up in the service, and here's a flower, get a flower, hand it to a neighbor. Here's water and some stones. You can express a grief by dropping the stone into the water. You can write in this book, and it'll be incorporated into a spoken extemporaneous prayer. Just things that aren't, so deeply Protestant, or that they don't carry the sort of trappings of you know that's fresh. That's real and fresh. And I'll be real with you, Eli. I don't often get all my spirituality out of Sunday morning worship either. But I think that for me, at least, that coming together to be with other people, to witness to something broader, bigger than myself, even if it's just, some days I might believe in God, and some days I might find myself a little harder to believe in God, but or sort of broader, ultimate, transcendent things. But I can always believe in other people, and if I'm with other people and I'm witness to, I feel that. But I'm interested in finding ways to get out, to get the life of the church beyond Sunday morning. So finding other ways to engage. Personally, I find more spirituality looking at stars or walking in the woods than I
Yeah.
do in a building.
Yeah.
That
Well, and also, when you talk about stories and you talk about storytelling, I mean, I think that um, there's a lot of power in that as well.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons why I started speaking of happy is because I wanted to have conversations with people who, are your everyday people, because people were like, "Are there any LGBTQ plus folks here?" I'm like, "Well, heck yes, there are. I mean, there's a whole shit ton of us." Whether you wanna believe it or not.
Mhm.
And so that's why I started speaking of happy, so that I could actually have interviews and have conversations with people in our community, share the great things that organizations and whatnot are doing, like Second Unitarian Church and Oats and all those things, but just also have just that connection and communication with people, right?
Mhm.
And, I love your essence. Like, your essence is very, kind and authentic, and and so I really appreciate that a lot.
I
Like,
feel the same way from you, Eli. I think, I use the word ministry very broadly just to mean any kind of service we give to the people beyond us. And I feel like you have a powerful ministry here. You know, you're
well,
doing really good work. So,
thank you. I mean, I do like to talk too, so that helps. Speaking of happy,
yeah.
I started it to put the word happy back into the word gay, and then it kind of evolved. And, thankfully, through the pandemic, it was a way for me to stay connected and, uh, and also help other folks learn about what was going on in our community by different organizations and that what's available. And also just meet people and hear from other people. I have parents reach out to me all the time asking me about different things. And so I've always shared about oats, and that organization was there and open. And I'm glad to hear now that it's open to all ages, because, I mean, I kind of knew that was a truth.
I
Um,
need that sort of, we need to be able to humanize one another. It's how we give each other permission to be and to become.
yeah.
It lets us. I remember how I was able to come out, and I was able to come out because I met a trans woman at Tennessee Valley who happened to be the youth minister, which was funny. I wound up being the youth minister at Tennessee Valley after she left. So Tennessee Valley has a pretty good record of hiring trans women to be the youth minister.
Wow.
Um, but um, but when I saw her and I saw her, living, like taking a doctorate in psychology, I believe she was, and I'm like, wait, you're not like some Jerry Springer cartoon. What is this? What is this? And why do I feel this kinship and this connection and why do I feel witnessed to just by your presence?
Mm,
We give each other permission to be and to become, and not just through our transness. I think we give each other permission for all kinds of things. We're social animals, so we communicate by presence and by language, but we just give each other permission to be real and to be authentic. Um, and I feel that this is how I was able to come to terms with myself. And some shoot, I think it's almost actually my 10 year anniversary.
oh,
but
yeah.
going on it. But just that simple presence. And we didn't really talk a whole lot, to be honest. She was pretty introverted and shy, but I was like, wow, you're a whole goddamn person of your whole life. Like, and I feel just use that word ministering. I'm a minister to just by this person's presence. And I think it's important that we have that sort of, broader, that sort of big group of different kinds of people that can give each other permission to keep living. So we
Yeah.
can be at each other's backs and remind each other that life is worth living because sometimes it's really, really hard. Um, I think during COVID, especially, we felt very alienated, very outside. We've not had those opportunities to be with other trans people in person. It can be painful. I know how isolating COVID was for me when I wasn't able to be around my community and my people, and I just felt like the only person in the world who knew what it was like to be this way, and it's heartbreaking. it's
Yeah.
it's eviscerating, you know? It's like
Well, and,
it's
it
an
is
estrangement, yeah.
there is a certain sense of, connection and community that happens with trans folks who get together.
Mhm.
And, because there's things that we can say that we don't have to answer a bunch of background questions for. It's just a knowing, right? It's just a knowing because of that common experience out in the world. And so I think that's what's really important for people to understand, and particularly folks who are cis, who are showing up at the meetings,
Mhm.
to understand that, this place is very sacred for folks like us.
Absolutely.
And there are not a whole lot of places like it. I mean, there is another group that meets, but they are predominantly I don't know if they allow young people,
Mhm.
at least not below 18, I don't think. And they tried at one point to have a group where, like, partners or friends of people who are transgender, non-binary, gender nonconforming could come to the meeting, but then they would separate and go to a different room. And I don't know if that is ever really, like, so that they could have their conversation that they would need to have. Because I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are things that our significant others that might need to talk about who are not transgender, non-binary, and gender nonconforming, and have that space where they can share some of those things, some of those fears, some of those, you know, uh, thoughts or feelings that they're having around the transition of their partner, and
Sure. Yeah.
particularly if they've been together
And they
through the whole thing.
um, yeah, I think it is important for partners to be able to have that community as well. Speaking of partners, it is my partner is cisgender, heterosexual, straight by all intents and purposes. But by being with me, there is this proximity to queerness, which is new and different. You know,
Mm,
we've been together for well over a year now. But great guy. I love Vincent. He's a sweetheart. I would not be here without him. But but that is different. You know, it is different. And also, just when I say proximities to queerness, it does not entail that he is queer necessarily, but like, but not a lot of people might differentiate, you know, transness from gayness. And so if I get outed somewhere and we're together, well, guess what? Not only am I broadly speaking gay, but so is he. And this is the lens through which like cis normativity presents itself to the world. Cis heteronormativity presents itself. You know, it just sees the other. It
yeah,
just sees that, oh, you're on the outside. You're not like me. You're the other, like a Hegelian kind of way. Um, and that can be really scary for people who aren't. I mean, it's scary for all of us, but especially if you've never experienced it before and is your new partner that you love so much, and now you're having to contend with the world. And for me, it's like it's a Tuesday, man.
oh, yeah, because it just comes with a whole 'nother host of things, like,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you say, he is a cis straight man,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And there is that collapse of gender identity and sexual orientation that just kind of, like, lives out in the world, and so people will say that, or, like, I say I'm queer, but my definition of queer is different than another person's definition of queer. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a part of the community, and I've always been a part of this community even prior to my transition, because I've always been attracted to folks who are feminine presenting.
Mhm.
And so initially I was still like in my transition trying to like, okay, so where do I fit now? Am I a straight man? I'm like, but am I really a man? Like, because then I started asking questions around what really is a man, right? Like, what is that really? Like, what is a woman really? Like, I'm
Mhm.
not trying to deny any trans person of their own personal experience of being who they believe and know themselves to be. Like, I get the experience of inside I felt a way, and I now want my outside to match that way. And then I think about it and I think like, what really are some of these things that we've created, right? These constructs of conversation and being that don't necessarily need to be there. If I could just be Eli
Yeah.
and just say that, like, the pronoun that affirms me the most is he, I'm okay with they, and maybe if I didn't have to spend the first 50 years of my life forced into the she box by all y'all,
Mhm.
I would be okay with she too, but I'm not.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever will be, right? There's that uncomfortable, but I do know that intrinsically I feel masculine and feminine and all of the things. I feel all of those things. And sometimes I feel none of them. So it's like I start to like I've just expanded my own vocabulary around my own personal experience. So I try not to map anything onto anyone. And I might ask questions of people that they don't normally hear because it's not common for us as trans folks to actually be in a situation where we are like that affirmation is first.
Mhm.
It just doesn't happen, not out in the everyday world. Even on my best days where I feel the most masculine and I'm expressing myself very masculinely and I'm thinking that everyone is seeing me that way, then I get misgendered and it just throws me off the whole rest of my day.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. I don't know how to explain it. It's not like I'm like suddenly triggered or angry or want to yell at the person. It hurts more than anything.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of understanding that I think the general world just sometimes doesn't get. Most people just don't really get that. Like, I try to explain to people, like, we all want to just be seen, heard, honored, and affirmed. I'm sure you can all think of a time in your life where you felt invisible. We can all look back at a time in our life where we really truly felt invisible. And when you can bring yourself to that memory, then it's like, why is it so hard not to understand and build that bridge of understanding with folks like us to go, "Oh, okay. Now I get it. Like, yes, I used to feel invisible when XYZ happened." And then have them understand how that might feel. Cause like now people just say stuff to me like, "Oh my God, I can't believe people misgendered you because you look so masculine." And I'm just like, but what is masculinity really? What is it? Can you tell me? I'm still trying to find it. I'm gonna die trying.
Well, that thing I mentioned about the mystery earlier. Um, it is. I think they're social cultural constructs related to, but distinct from the sort of physical reality of people's bodies as they've been differentiated through time and societies. It's not as though all societies and all times have just sort of like defaulted to two genders. That's just not true. Like throughout the world, there have been. I mean, talking about indigenous people in America, not all indigenous people in America, but many
Yeah, right.
have articulated the experience of and honored the experience of people whose both expression of and experience of gender was beyond the sort of binary model. And of course, Protestant colonizers have different ideas about that, which is
Mhm.
deeply unfortunate. But even there, it's not as though trans people didn't exist in Europe. They were just forced into hiding at the burning stake or the point of a sword.
Yeah.
Um, that's and sort of pre-literate societies. Who's to say who was what and how it worked out? And I don't have a good answer for what is masculinity or what is femininity. I think we as human beings, like I said, we give each other permission, and this is the sort of language we use to talk about certain characteristics, certain ways we express ourselves, certain patterns of dress, certain behaviors, certain patterns of speech, and we go from there. And but we also, like you said, we contain multiplicities. Um, I tend to dress very feminine and don't get misgendered that often, but I feel you when it happens. It hurts. It hurts. I think because because it feels disrespectful. It makes me feel like I'm not performing gender right or something. And I feel like I'm being like pushed on the outside, and it warps the story that I'm trying to tell about my life, the one that I've been told that I couldn't tell. Um, and I agree with you, Eli. I think if I hadn't been sort of coerced for the first like better half of my life into being in one box, I would probably be more comfortable with with a very expansive idea of gender. And I really wish that for young trans people to be able to, just to live one's life as one sees fit. Your body is gender is a choose your own adventure story. This is not there is no biological determinism. Live your truth. But I think for me, I have more affinity towards womanhood, which is how I think about my own sense of womanhood, my own femininity. My experiences as a trans woman are not like that of a cis woman, and I'll be the first one to say that. I don't know what it was like to grow up as a little girl in like high school and deal with all that mess, but I have experienced misogyny, um, and so there is a shared experience and there's a different experience, but that's why I use the word affinity rather than like same experience. There is a proximity that is there's something of a kinship there, I believe, and I'm still assessing out exactly what that means and what that looks like, but I try and keep an open heart, remain curious, remain adaptive, and don't feel too particularly wed to one label or the other, or any particular label. Let oneself be dynamic and let oneself be changing. We as narrative beings are also fundamentally transforming beings. All things. It's my one kind of metaphysical theological claim that I like to wed myself to is that our bones are new every 7 years. Our bodies are constantly falling apart and putting themselves back together. This whole world is in process more than it is in hard substance. The entire cosmos is in transition of a sort all the time, always has been, always will be. Um, that's what keeps it interesting. That's what keeps it exciting and creative and generative and novel. I think we as trans people are kind of like that in microcosm, just like all people are, but we really wear it on our sleeve. That we are a way for the cosmos to know itself, and we as trans people are a way that just sort of embodying radical, dynamic, beautiful transformation, um, and authenticity. That's all too lacking in a world that tells you your only purpose is to consume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. That's a whole episode all
On a whole different like tangent there. Sorry, Eli, but
No. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it because, I don't often find folks who are willing to go deeper in communication, right? And I am someone who does like really think very deeply. Like when I watch a television program that most people might think is just something that happens to be on and it's not really necessarily impacting them really deeply. And when I watch these things, they do impact me really deeply. Yeah. Like, I really do think about those things. I do really like watching about that cult and what happened and learning about some of the stories of the people who did die there. When I think about those stories and I think about those people that were, uh, that made the choice to give themselves up to that. And, it's heartbreaking to listen to family members who didn't know what to do or how to help them out, even when a few of them came out and tried to be out and couldn't and had to go back. And how devastating that is to think um, that they couldn't get out. And so, I just I just think about things on a much deeper level. I'm just not really, even a comedy will get me crying sometimes when I'm, laughing so hard that I'm crying, but also just, comedy is not always pretty.
The story within the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, so if someone were to come to your service on Sunday,
Mhm.
what could they expect?
Expect a welcome um, from me and from our ushers and greeters. Expect worship that isn't necessarily out of a particular book. Any particular book, it could be anything. We have general themes we operate with, but we don't use one central text. I think this Sunday we're preaching about it's Mother's Day, and I'm talking about the forces of nurturing. Where are the ways we've been nurtured? How are the ways that we've stopped ourselves from being nurtured? How have we put up bars on our heart? Because maybe we feel we're unworthy of being loved or something. I think this happens to a lot of people in our world. What are those ways that we keep people from engaging in that all too human act of caring for other people and in our work of caring for others? So that's this Sunday we are moving into more like kind of live music. I play guitar, so we're gonna be playing mixing that in there too. We're
Is the music more spiritual based, or is it
it could be anything. I'm playing Paul Simon's "Like a Rock."
Oh, okay,
Love me
okay.
like a rock. So it, it, we have hymns, but they're drawn from different sources. I know there's a Rumi poem that isn't a hymn we like to sing. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Even if you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come yet again, come. Um, our hymns don't generally reference like God or particular like figures from mythical traditions. They're generally more broad and allow for like individual interpretation. But we use contemporary music. We use music of our own. I think we're trying to get better about cultural appropriation.
Mm.
Imperfect. we're learning. I think this is something we've done a lot of growth on as a broader denomination over the past like 10, 15 years. But we have sort of breakout groups where we invite speakers who we do the split the plate offering with. A really common throughout congregations, really important to Second Unitarian in particular, is the shared offering. So we split the offering with a cause or an organization. This month it's Black and Pink.
Oh,
The folks doing a prison abolition for incarcerated LGBTQIA plus people, which is righteous.
yes.
So we try and keep things open, keep things fresh, keep things interesting. It is going to be very fresh because it'll be my first sermon there this Sunday. So, um, but we're going to be experimenting with liturgy, just the sort of elements of worship to see how we can get up, get on our feet, do different things. A little less sit down, stand up, more a little, you know, engage in a human experience. But yeah, it's not going to be just straight out of out of the Bible per se or any particular book. It is it is diverse by its own nature, and we tell lots of different stories there. So
Nice. Very cool.
mhm,
Well, we have a couple of minutes left.
sure.
If you were to see someone, just meet someone on the street who asked you, I'll give you the last 2 minutes of the show here to kinda give your elevator speech about why they should come to Second Unitarian.
Well, sure. We're uh, we're opening back up. We are refreshing everything. We have a lot of new movement going on, and I think it's an opportunity to see to experience and to participate in religion in action, faith in action that is necessarily pluralistic, that's diverse, that is open-hearted and open-spirited, where one can bring all of themselves, all that they are, all that they carry. It's worship amongst Unitarian Universalist faiths is different depending on the congregation because that's who we are. But Second Unitarian, I have a feeling is going to be spirit filled in a big way, in a broad way, less austere, more alive. A lot of my homiletics, my preaching centers on nature. So if you are interested in, looking for the poetry in the natural world, that's what I mostly try to focus on. And it's a place to find friends and find community and to get connected to social justice work, to build relationships, to share your story and to have short stories shared with you, to witness to others and to be witnessed to love and to be loved. And but most importantly, just to be able to bring all that you are, and to know that you have inherent worth and dignity, and that's going to be witnessed to here.
Wonderful. Well, that's beautiful. What time is service on the weekend?
I got it in my phone, but my phone's in the other room. Yeah, it's my first day. I'll go easy on me. Our services begin at 10:30. Our doors open up earlier than that, so around like 9:30 is when we'll kind of have people milling around and getting started and getting coffee. And coffee is the sacrament, y'all.
Okay.
It's 10 p.m. I'm gonna have a quarter of a cup of coffee here.
Donuts? Will there be donuts?
No, maybe. I don't know if they have donuts or not. I wasn't paying attention this past Sunday. Sometimes there's light snacks, but worship begins at 10:30, so that's when we'll have the music will start playing and we'll all be getting to our seats and stuff. But 10:30, 11:30 is some like social time afterwards. These things are subject to change as we're experimenting with new stuff and new patterns. But if you just wanted to come for the worship service, starts at 10:30, and would love to see some folks there.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. Again, thank you so much for being on the show, for accepting my invitation and sharing so beautifully about what is going on at Second Unitarian Church. Again, remember, Oats is happening on May 21st.
May 21st.
May 21st from noon to 2. Bring a snack or something to share with the group. And I did put a link here to you can actually pull this up. It's openarmsomaha.com is the Oats email address or website address. And then here is the about page for the Second Unitarian Church of Omaha. Nice light reading there if you want to learn more about the church. But again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, those of you who tuned in and hung out. I do see we had 5 solid people, nobody asking questions. They must all be your fans and already know all the answers to the questions they might ask.
Hey, y'all.
Thank you so much for being here this evening. Take care. That's it for this episode of Speaking of Happy.
Peace, Eli. Hope we get to meet in person here soon.
Oh, absolutely. You will. You will. All right. Thank you.